Okay, so I decided if I'm going to do footprints in the sand, I should at least make a boot sole that looks like a landing boot sole. This is a Canadian landing boot sole. That's what I used to make these. I just measured this off a 120 millimeter Verlinden figure, like the foot size. But you don't need to do that. You can use a ruler, a scale ruler. So you can see I just, like I did both sides. So I'll use them, what I'll do is I'll just put this is a 80 thou rod. Here I'll just glue this in, and then I'll use them as a stamp, like in some soft acrylic texture paste, and then glue with matte medium, like the sand texture over top. It's super fine, so I don't lose the footprint. But I mean, sand is not, like, unless it's wet, even then the footprints are not going to be super highly defined. But you can see I added a little bit of the nose plate and the heel plate, like a horseshoe almost. A little more proud than what it should be maybe, but because of the sag of medium and so on and the softness of it, at least I'll get some kind of distinction there. And then with this one, I just built them up with layers of plastic. Use like 80 thou and then some 20 thou sheet. So I'll trim down. Now I'm a shoemaker. Okay, so this is just some sample acrylics. So I'm going to try this ceramic stucco, which I use quite a bit of, just to do the footprint texture. So this has been sitting now for, let's see, 15, 20, 25 minutes. And I'm going to take my sole stamp or my boot stamp. I'm just going to push it in. Okay, that's not too bad. Still a bit soft though. Okay, so make sure those go in the water. Here's another one. As long as it gives some indication of footsteps in the sand, because sand is not going to be completely defining in terms of like a hard clay kind of mud. So, I mean, I might go with that, but I think I'm going to wait till this dries a little bit longer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint it with matte medium straight from the bottom. I'm going to sprinkle this oxide sand, because it's super fine and it won't soften any sharp textures too much. And I mean, that's the way sand is, right? Sand dries really fast and it starts to collapse on itself. This is, this particular one here is this fine pumice gel. I find it to be a little bit too kind of creamy, because I want a texture to begin with before I put this over, and I want it to sort of look like this, right? This is what I'm after. So I think that this will work. You know what I mean? Okay, so I have to resculpt all the areas where I'm going to do the foot traffic. Now here's the thing. I know there's different ways of doing this, but if I can't do the sand texture according to 1/16 scale, the diorama doesn't get done. Like, I'm not interested in doing it. Like, I'll just come out and say this right now. Like, this has been a long project, as most of you know, like those that have been following the diorama series here at Juno. When I first set out to do this, when it was the concept in my mind, the pivotal primary factor was, can I do the sand? Will it look like sand? Will it feel like sand? When people look at it, will they think, yep, that's sand? Like, it won't be a distraction where it's too coarse or it's too like smooth. There's not enough cuts and scale undulations. That it's critical. Like, the whole groundwork, like I've mentioned that before, like for me, I mean, was critical. So I had to resculpt this, right? So I took pure matte medium and then sprinkled on sand, vacuumed it off. It's nice, ready for paint. I'm going to do the same up here and here, but I want to show you this part first. So what I did was is I took this, I really like this, like next to the golden, what was the other one? The golden texture paste I like to use. I really like this Liquitex ceramic stucco. It just seems to be the perfect textures for so many things, like even this wall, 187 scale roads, even 135th scale as well, really good. And walls, and it takes paint so beautifully. Anyway, so I've repainted this on, and I did this at about 25 minutes, and I've said I wanted to wait, so I timed this, right? And I've mentioned that also before in like the model railroad terrain series and videos that I do, that you have to try stuff. Like I still do it. Like I'm 64, I've been building models like dioramas since I was 10. And I still do test pieces to make sure the mediums and the textures are going to work for me before I apply to the diorama. Yeah, it gets a bit nervous. It's like, oh, whoa, what am I doing? But you'll have the confidence if you've gone this far. Now, this is on there now, and then I made sure that, like I used a flat brush, like I just stabbed it on. It's about a, I don't know, a 1/16 of an inch thick. And I made sure I feathered it nice, because, you know, this is all finished here, and I don't want to mess this fascia up. But I knew that ahead of time, so I made sure that I feathered this edge nice. And then what I'm going to do is, because this will probably kick off faster than, well, I'm going to try 25 minutes again, because this was 45 minutes, and you can see that, like I'm really happy with that. Because if I put a wash on that, like when I paint this and I put a little bit of a darker wash in there, those tread marks and things are going to show, right? Just the way I want them to. In the sand that's in sort of a drying phase, although it would be maybe more wet down here because there'll be water deeper down in this crater. There's going to be water featured there. This upper layer sand will be more dry, so these boot prints don't need to be super sharp, but they need to be fairly distinct. Like there was activity going on, you know, around the back here, offloading everything, you know. And then, then I'll have some action here where there'll be shovels and picks and things, and then there's going to be some, here's another challenge, is there's going to be some seaweed, like two types of seaweed. So if the seaweed was running on the edge along up here, when this mine blew off, this sand would be over top of the seaweed. So I might have to resculpt some of this, but we'll see. You know, you never know, like as you're closing in on the end of a diorama, things always change, things that you never even thought of as you're evolving the story within the scene and on the terrain, etc. Okay. Okay, so I did a little bit of fiddling around before I turned on the camera just to see whether the texture here was kicking off to where I want to. Now it's very slow kicking. Now here's a couple things. Now, if you want really sharp defining footprints, like in this scale, let's say, or even probably in 1/35th, then you might want to think about using Daz clay. Like it's an air dry clay. I used it for the brick and mortar, or the brick walls and the cobblestone. However, I don't want to use Daz clay on here because it's not stable if you put it on top of acrylic, like it's a different type of medium. It's okay to use Daz clay and then paint it with acrylic, but I'm not going to put a air dry clay thin layer that won't feather nice into this existing texture. It'll flake and crack, and it'll cause problems later on down the road when you get layers of paint on it. So that's why I'm using this acrylic medium, which is a little bit more challenging to work with, but it's 10 times more durable. So you can see I already got a thumbprint right here. So I'm just going to, you know, put in a few, I got to throw those in. I got a little bath water there just to wash off these treads so I can get it, because it picks up the, you know, the acrylic. But actually I like the way it's, you know, the way it's working right now. So you can see, so try to simulate, you know, the weight of the foot going forward. See, that's okay, because I want collapsing footprints like the sand. Like I don't want super sharp, unless it's, you know, happens to be wet. Okay, so there it is all dry the next day. And it's as hard as nails, but I can cut it with a butter knife, right? That's the beautiful properties of acrylic mediums. They're hard, they're durable, but you can cut them easily, right? Without, like, you know, with a, you know, number 11 blade or even a dull knife, I've been able to hack away and pry stuff away. But the footprints look really awesome. Okay, so now this, I have to repeat this in a random way. Let me just move this forward a bit. In a random way here, and then up here. Here I'm just going to have footsteps because I'm going to use artistic license just to emphasize footsteps coming up to the foot of the ladder. Whereas here I'll have more activity like this. I'll have around here because they would have been, you know, walking around the vehicle and, you know, unloading armaments and weapons and stuff. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically take this matte medium. I'm just going to squeeze some on straight from the bottle. I'm going to take this brush and I'm going to wet it down. I'll just show you that paint too. That's the Model Air 71.142 Audio Sand that I painted this. So when this is dry, I paint this, and that's what it looks like. It's a bit darker than this sand, but the only reason why I do it is because when I do the sand, if there's anything bleeding through, like it won't be white. Like the acrylic, it'll be this dark IDF sand. So it's like a primer. So I'm just going to take this now, and I'm going to just wet the whole area down, okay, with the straight matte medium. This is like a number 8 Princeton GP brush or budget brush. So I'll just do this little area right here to show you, so because there's enough footsteps here. So when I'm going to put it on, like I'm going to have to let it dry and then vacuum it off. Okay. So I'll put that out of the way. We'll grab some of this Badger aluminum oxide abrasive sand. I'll show you what I'm going to do. Sorry if my hand is in the way. So I'm going to just sprinkle it on. You can do lots of little sprinkle techniques and build up layers of this sand as well with matte medium, like over and over again. And if you just use straight matte medium, it won't bleed through too deeply into the sand. So when you vacuum this off, you get all the sharp detail of this, but impregnated with a thin layer of the oxide sand to give you that sandy beach effect where all the traffic's been. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So this, I'm going to wait till this dries till tomorrow. I'm going to paint it the same way with this IDF sand, and then do the same thing with these, and then I'll show you how this looks. And then once that's dry, it's just a matter of airbrushing this, some of the colors that I want, the finish kind of more, sort of more golden brown colors, and then leaving some of the dark foot imprints or even applying washes to just help them pop a little bit, okay? Okay, so this area here is dry now. It's been textured with the Badger oxide sand. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a bit of water here on the side of the tray and use some of this IDF cyanide gray that I like. You'll notice that you get your favorite color every now and again. You go through phases, and when it comes to groundwork, I love the buff and the earth tones by Tamiya, but for Vallejo, I love this IDF sand. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a thin wash. Actually, it's not really thin. It's a heavy wash into the footprints. And when it dries, it's a bit darker than the actual raw sand, which is going to get lightly airbrushed, those golden brown colors. And hopefully these footsteps in the sand will be darker despite the airbrush overspray, because the airbrush overspray is going to be really thin like the way I always paint. So, because I always think transparent layers all the time. So I'm just going to have a little bit of fun flooding out these footsteps, and then we'll do this upper part, and then that part will be done, and we're getting close to putting on the final highlights and color on the sand here, okay? How's everybody doing? So this is really getting close now. You can see my reference photos here, and this hasn't been highlighted yet, but you can see, let me just show you this photo. So I'm getting in these colors, right? That was that desert color that I showed you. This is what I want now. All the gravel textures, it's all done. The sand is in place. See how it's a bit lighter up here? Because it's more dry. As you get down, it's dark or it's wet, but then I do want some of that gold, you know, French sand, because it's beautiful. I don't want to lose all that, because over here I'm going to have like seaweed. Like, I didn't know where the seaweed was going to go, so I don't even know chronologically if I've shown that yet, but if I haven't, like, I thought I'd have more of it, but now that like, this is what happens when you build your diorama. You're evolving, and it's changing from week to week, and you're just adjusting your composition of all your textures and colors right to the end. So I really like this color because you can see that it's in there now. And then see this here, like, here's the XF57 buff up in here, and here's the desert yellow. So that's sort of what I'm after. See that? Okay, so I'm feeling really good about that. So this will be my final color. And then I might have to repeat this. I'll just say this in closing. Like, I might have to repeat some of this, because when I do the tread, like the thrown tread might be a little bit buried in the sand. So I might have to, you know, pinch in and model a little bit of this, but I know now. So keep your paints separate. I wrap mine in tape and label them so that when I come back, like, it might be the next day or a month later, where's the paint that you were, you know, to match. Okay, because, and then if I have a crate, like an enamel crate, you know, maybe it's partially sunk from the high tide and the tide's gone out, there's, you know what I mean? So, because you want to weight, like the physics, you want to model your physics into the terrain, so you might have to resculpt some areas as well. Now, just in closing on this part, let me just show you here. So I have this color, this desert yellow, and I've cut in around, you know, all the foot traffic. So what I want to do now is I just want to back off. Okay, I'll just test here. So you just test on your fascia, you know, when your paint comes on. Okay, maybe this is better right here. Like, test when that paint comes on, and then just go back a ways like this, and then just dust, like, just unify those footprint traffics with the existing higher sand. Like, just to kind of soften them a little bit. And then when the highlights, you know, when I do the highlights, which I'll show you, then it'll be good, okay? Okay, so I'm going to apply the highlights now, the buff, but I just want to just give you a quick refresh about where we were and where we are. So as you know, I for all my terrain painting through the airbrush, via the airbrush, I use isopropyl alcohol, 50%, 70, 99. It really doesn't matter. I generally save this for cleaning my airbrush because it cleans like my airbrush out like hot butter in a pan. It's just awesome that way. Whereas the lower the percentages, I tend to thin my paint with that. For terrain, like when I do a model, I use their recommended, but not for terrain. There's no need for it. So IPA and Tamiya is my friend, as most of you know. Now, here was the color that I put in with the traditional brush with water for all these footsteps here and the crater, right? This is 71.142 IDF sand gray, okay? Just by hand washes, so on, right? Okay. Then I took the airbrush with very thin and I applied XF59 desert yellow. This is where we're at now. Like this is the color that I, was showing, like this here, desert yellow, okay? All right, that's what you see now, but it's a little bit darker. You want to know why? Because when I lay on the buff, the final highlight, very thin, some of this is going to show through, so it's going to mute some of this down, and that's how I get that color. And then up here where it's dry, so when the tide recedes back, the sun hits, this dries before this does, this dries before the wet sand at the shoreline does. Like that's the idea, light to dark with variations in between, okay, which you just allow that to happen as you paint. So now that I have those colors in, the XI57 will be my final highlight color, and I'll just show you how I apply it. So I'm going to start up here, and when I apply it, this, I don't want to lose all this color. It's going to show through. It's going to shift more to a gold. That's what I'm after. This is getting close to the gold, but this buff will really achieve the tone and the value of this gold sort of sand that I've always wanted. So it's about multiple layers of color to achieve your final color. And you learn that when you practice. Okay? See that? That's it. See how that shifted from this a little bit? That's the color I wanted. And I'll just show you the drawing. See that? Okay? Cheers.